Hey there, welcome to the House Music Connection podcast. I am your host, Tony Fuel, and in today's episode, I'll be talking with Knox, a veteran house producer of 25 years or more. I first got to know Knox a few years ago through a mutual connection of ours named Eddie Gordon. At the time, I was a very inexperienced producer, and I had only released music that I released myself. And I think I only had one or two tracks out at the time. And, I was looking for a label where I could get on TrackSource, and Eddie made the connection for me with Knox. It went from there. And so I will be forever grateful to Knox for taking a chance on my record, Change the Vibe. Looking back now, I really feel that the record wasn't even that good. And so I'm super grateful that Knox believed in the record and in me enough to sign the record and put it out on TrackSource. And so that was my like I said, my very first record on TrackSource. And so I have a special place in my heart for KHM. Knox embodies a true love for house music, and he's a testament of tenacity and has just stuck with it through the years. And I'm very impressed by that. I hope that this conversation sheds some light on how amazing Knox is of a person, and then how dedicated he is as a producer. Without further ado, let's get into the conversation. All right, Knox, thanks for joining me. So for our listeners who may or may not be familiar with you, can you give a short version of your story and kind of who you are, what you're about, some highlights of just maybe me in 1 minute or 60 seconds?
Let's see. Well, the short version is I've been a lifelong house music producer since the early 90s. Fell in love with it just being a club kid in New York City. Mm-hmm. Most amazing place ever growing up and having the selection of Palladium and Roxy's. And I was even on the edge age-wise of sneaking into Studio 54 one night. And those experiences as a kid just leave a lasting imprint. And eventually I just wanted to become part of that world. So I spent the last 2.5 decades spitting out as much music as I could just because I loved it. And I'm still here and just trying to grow and enjoy it.
It seems like you'll always love it.
It's, it's definitely borderline obsession. I'm one of those people that just always has something to prove, I think. And when people tell you no, as I'm a Taurus, I'm a stubborn bull.
Okay.
And, and when people are like, oh, you can't do that. And I'm just here to prove people wrong. But besides that, music has been the best therapy I could ever imagine.
For sure.
House music especially, there's just something really spiritual about it that I don't think any other genre can even touch. And the fact that, to me, it's the only genre of music that can be endlessly strung together in a DJ mix and just create these incredible sort of endless tapestries. So there is a lifetime supply of therapy out there for anyone who's looking for it, just to go listen to your favorite DJ in a mixtape.
Awesome. Cool. Let's see. So you talked a little bit about Limelight and Roxy and growing up in New York and one of the best places for house music, especially in the 90s there. I know that you also, you started producing pretty early on after that, or pretty soon after that, right?
I had, when I was a kid, when I was like 10, my dad always used to tell me about a friend of his that was an electronic musician and always promised to take me to his recording studio and never did. So I always had this, I always just imagined what it was in my head. And then DJing actually started really young because spending time at Roxy's, at the roller skating rink, which turned into a nightclub and the whole thing. I got really interested in DJing when I was, I think 12. And so, picking up turntables that young, it just becomes this, just this sort of cemented into your life really early. Mm-hmm. And I DJ'd but I never got into a recording studio. And then I got to college and I actually had a professor who was a video teacher. And one day I'm walking by his office and the door was pried open. And there's this recording studio in there, MIDI interface, keyboards, all this stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, this is what I want. Can you show this to me? And he promised, and he never did. So again, so then I went through college, DJing, parties, the whole deal. And then after school, my first job out of college was doing the Bryant Park fashion shows. And after about a year there, we ended up hiring a guy freelance to help out with the sound systems. And magically, it's a guy named John Rock Mateo. And he's got a friend of his, Eddie Matos. And we instantly hit it off. And he invited me down to his house down in the Lower East Side. And walk into his apartment down in the projects. And it's like a 3-bedroom apartment, literally wall-to-wall records, floor to ceiling. The living room was the recording studio. I mean, they had nightclub bass bins in their living room, where they had the keyboard stacked on that. They had a Mac Classic. So I mean, this apartment must have really angered neighbors at some times, and sometimes they probably loved it too.
Yeah.
But that ended up being Mateo and Matos of all people. So I like the minute Eddie touched this keyboard and samples came out, I was like, this is what I want to do with my life. So they taught me the gear. They showed me like what an S950 is. They helped me out with software and getting everything together. We actually put a couple things together that never went out. They're still out there on DAT somewhere and may see the light of day. But there are a couple songs that John and I did together, just sort of playing around. And so that was early 90s. And it was a combination of a passion of music and the technology. I mean, they were both fascinating, both having all of that equipment to just plug in and make it talk together. It was just like, as a early 20 something, I'm like, what is all this? And it was just amazing that it all sort of interconnected and worked and made music. So that journey started really, really early in the 90s. And then miraculously, like I put together my first EP and I ship it off to Strictly Rhythm and Nervous and Freeze. And I think there was one other label. And I literally mailed out my demo on an audio cassette in the mail, and ended up getting a message on my answering machine one day from Todd Terry, who basically signed my first EP
Nice.
on Freeze / TNT Records, and it went out on vinyl, and it was called Dig This EP. And a little interesting history about the EP itself as well. My boss from the fashion shows had a record collection of the gods. And it was well over 100,000 records of all different genres because it was for fashion shows. And he had a massive selection of movie soundtrack on vinyl. And I always loved the movie Car Wash. So I'm like, oh my God, you have Car Wash? So I take out Car Wash and I put it on the turntable and I'm listening to it. And you hear in the movie, there's a radio announcer goes, I know you're going to dig this. But when he's saying that, there's like a guitar lick over it. It's not clean. Like you can't sample it from the movie.
Right.
But the soundtrack had that sample free and clear.
Nice.
So that was like the first thing I ever sampled. And I made like a 6-track EP using that and a couple other things. And that was pretty amazing to use that. And now I've actually heard that sample in a couple other things. I believe Todd actually used it himself a couple years later in an album he produced. And then I've heard it in some hip hop. I think it was in the artist Braille used it. He was believe it or not, he was a Christian hip hop guy who I was never into Christian hip hop, but at the time, I think when I was listening, it was really soulful hip hop, really jazz influenced stuff. While things were going in another direction, for some reason there was a small group of Christian hip hop guys, and Braille was one kid, and I think he sampled that too. And it's been out there a couple times. So I'll take the claim to fame for releasing that sample into the wild.
Yeah.
off the record I found. I mean, like what a miracle is that your boss
Right.
has the cleared sample on a record.
Yeah. That's
That was
awesome.
something from a movie that I had watched a million times. I mean, Car
Yeah.
Wash is definitely a brilliant movie.
Sounds pretty
You know?
serendipitous to me. So that's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
So have you always been called Knox or releasing music as Knox?
So that was actually the original was under Graham Knox Frazier. I just put it
Yeah.
under my own name. I couldn't think of a cool name, so I just put mine out, and
Yeah.
so I did that, and then for quite a while I released a bunch of things under Graham Knox Frazier. That's a couple house albums, a couple hip hop albums that I'd put out on college radio back when I was putting stuff in the wrong direction, but it was a direction.
Right.
And then Eddie Gordon, after working with him and distributing with him for like a year, he's like, that name's not gonna fit on a billboard anywhere, or
Right.
like it's a little long, it's a little wide for visually, and so I was like, hey Knox, so then I pick a name that is incredibly not unique, and so I think that motivates me also to be one of the good Knoxes that are out there, because there's if you do a search for Knox on Spotify, you'll find 100 of us.
Yeah.
And it's kind of annoying getting lost like that. But I think so far especially in the house music world, I've certainly made a name for myself.
Sure.
As Knox.
Right. And as you said, you want to be the one of the good ones. Cream rises, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yep.
I know that with your productions, it's definitely cream. It's very it's the cream that's rising to the top, because everything is so meticulously mixed and mixed really well. And so so that's a good strategy.
Well, that's also I spent about 6 years working with Scott Wozniak.
Okay.
And I had actually known him back in the days of Mateo and Matos, and met him like 2 or 3 times. Just he was at someone's house that I was at, so we kind of connected. But I lost touch with him for years, and then we reconnected again I think it was about 2012. And man, that man has a pair of ears that are just remarkable. And one of the things you really need to do and learn as a producer is how to hear and just how to listen. And I think it's honestly one of the most difficult tasks, is just to train your ear to know what sounds good and what sounds terrible.
Right. So how do you go about, I guess, training your ear? Where do you start?
It's just time. It's
sure.
I think it's volume. I think it's just I think it's just listening to everything you possibly can. And then, again, working with Scott in the studio, he would work on mixes, and I start to understand a lot of different things. And, you know, he showed me bad habits that I had. It's really easy when you're self-taught to have a ton of bad habits.
Sure.
You know, but I mean, he taught me things like scooping out the bottom end of mixes so that things don't conflict down there. You know, but again, I think it was just, you know, when you spend time with somebody that's like incredibly gifted, you eventually just sort of absorb things.
Yeah, it's kind of like
that's
osmosis.
what it is. It's like, exactly. It's just kind of this osmosis thing.
Sure.
You know, and so, you know, if you're having a problem with your music, go find someone who knows what the hell they're doing and just go hang out and have some beers with them.
Sure.
And see if you can just spend time. I mean, there's nothing better than spending time in the studio with somebody who knows, you know, what they're doing, because everybody works in a different way. There's not two people that work the same way, so they can show you new tricks and things. You know, but again, it's, you know, when you're just spend a lot of time with somebody with like incredible ears, you just start to learn things. And you know, and I've always had problems, you know, with like key and other things too, with like, I'm not this gifted musician that can go, oh, that's an A sharp minor vocal. Like I have to work a lot harder to get there than that. You know, but you start to understand relative notes and other things as you go, so that your brain starts to just function in this way where you start to understand it more. And again, it's just from, I think, just being around people that are just doing things the right way.
Right.
You know?
So it sounds like mentoring is pretty important.
Oh,
or it
absolutely.
can be, yeah.
And I think it's crucial. And the thing is that I always had this dream of like, oh, I'm in New York City one day. Louis Vega will mentor me, and then
Mm.
I'll be on top of the world. And it didn't work out that way. But Scott Wozniak is certainly nothing to sneeze at as far as musical talent.
Sure.
And grateful to be able to have spent so much time with him, and to do that. So yeah, if you can always find a mentor, and I know it's hard because time is short for people,
Right.
but also I think that people that are successful in this industry want to teach and want to help and want to pass this down. They know that there's life is short, and so go find somebody who maybe wants to teach somebody, because I think teachers love it too, because that refreshes everything they know, and it validates what they do. So if you have a favorite artist out there, and especially with today's social media, go befriend that person, and see what you can learn.
Right. And it's kind of cool because there's a lot of people who are releasing tutorials and educational content like on YouTube. And so you can kind of have a mentor
Yeah,
or mentoring from a lot of different people that
yeah,
you didn't necessarily have access to
yeah,
15, 20 years ago. And now
yeah,
today with so much technology, you can choose kind of different mentors and have so much access to people. And I know that
yeah,
you have kind of paid it forward or started, you've been paying it forward as well, because I've reached out to you to have you take a listen to some of my mixed downs, if you will, to give it some more, to give
yeah,
some feedback and whatnot. And
yeah.
you've given that feedback, and so it sounds like paying it forward
And
is
I was
pretty
I was
important to
completely
you as
wrong at the
well.
time. I was completely wrong at the time, but but positive in my assertions.
Sure.
No, but yeah. I mean, it's this is a community of music,
Hmm.
of musicians, and that's what I love about house music, is that it's so underground, and the people are real. Maybe there's a few people out there with a chip on their shoulder, or but man, this is just it's an entire industry devoted to people doing absolutely what they love
Hmm.
for no money or
Right.
barely any.
Hmm.
I mean, I know a lot of other industries probably do that as well, but man, there are, if you remove the people from the house music industry that were making less than $1,000 a year, you'd have like 100 players left. So
Right.
it's and so it's all the the best thing you can do is share with people and help everybody grow.
Yeah. It makes sense. It has me wondering if there's really anyone who makes a living doing house music, and they're probably not doing like just production, or they're definitely not going to sell enough records to make a living. So they're doing like teaching and coaching groups and all
That's the
kinds of
thing.
things. Yeah.
I don't think I wouldn't even think Louis Vega sales are great, as they are today. I mean, the whole industry's changed so much.
Hmm.
When I got signed by Freeze, I did 4 songs and I got a check for $1,500 up front. $1,500, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's who sees that? Who sees that today on any song ever? Unless you have a number one hit at Track Source in the main category,
Right.
maybe you've pocketed that much. But after it's split so many ways,
Hmm.
it's probably not. So, the
Yeah.
this but this industry entirely runs on love.
Hmm.
And that's what's so amazing about it.
Yeah. And so you mentioned community. And I think I've seen a shift for you and your trajectory over the last couple of years, where it seems like you've been really focusing a lot on community. You're kind of releasing things on your own imprint and whatnot. And then just the last couple of years, you've been really exploding with like just the different labels that you're being on. Can you say that a little bit more about that?
Well, so the only reason I have KHM, my own label, was because I was putting out a ton of music. So what happened was, well, let me back up a hair. So back up to like, I think it was like 2012, 2013. And I'm still Graham Knox Frazier. And I literally put out like my fifth album on college radio, but it was a direction I didn't want to go in. I wasn't sure why I was doing college radio, but it was the best option I had at the time. The distributor that I met, that's what he was, that's where he put me. So I decided to change gears, and I end up looking for a music distributor, and I find one online. I think through Twitter or something. I don't know. I find one, and I reach out, and I'm like, "Hey, I have, I've got some a bunch of music here. Can I distribute it?" And he said, "Let me take a listen." So I sent it to him, and he's like, "This isn't really my style. Why don't you try Eddie Gordon at Kings of Spins?" So I send this stuff to Eddie, and I start just pumping out as much music as I can through Eddie, because I had a ton that had been done that I hadn't released, and a ton I was working on. So I put out a bunch of stuff through Kings of Spins, and then I still wasn't in the store. So I didn't understand the whole record label thing at the time. I didn't really have any connections, even being in New York City. It really doesn't help. So I ended up trying to create my own record label, and the only thing I wanted to be on was TrackSource. There were some services that you could use, like TuneCore, but TuneCore would only get you on, Apple iTunes and whatever. It wasn't. So again, it wasn't genre specific enough for me. So I did try TuneCore for a while, dropped that, and then Eddie ended up putting me in the right direction for genre. And then I started the record label and just put out a bunch of stuff. And what I loved was the fact that there was no pushback. There was no delay in time. It was just, I wanted the song out, put it out, done. And I just sort of learned that whole process. And I did that for years. And I was at one point I was just feeling like I was just spinning my wheels. And then I wasn't sure like what direction to take. But then a good friend named Tony Fuel said, "Hey, why don't you try putting some stuff out on a record label?" And I said, "You know what? My stuff should be good enough at this point where, I won't be kicked in the balls as much as I think, or, get rejected and all this stuff." So I ended up throwing out a bunch of music, and sure enough, I think it was like 14 labels within a year. It was ridiculous. Like, everyone took everything I put out.
That's awesome.
And then, but on top of that, the real cherry was the King Street, where I did a remake of Jackie Moore's "This Time Baby." It's actually the original OJ song. And of course, I had you do a remix. There were a total of 8 remixes altogether. King Street snatched up both EPs, which was just a miracle for me. Talk about a dream label. And
for sure.
It was weird. It was just these dominoes that kept falling every time I'd throw an out. I was like, let me try a bigger label. Let me try a bigger label. Let me try a bigger label. And then I was like, King Street to me, like, it doesn't, for New York City, King Street, all the legends that are part of King Street to me was just an absolute miracle. So ended up putting that EP out on King Street. And then crazily enough, they re-released it on Street Kings, which is their sub label. And then the second EP went out, and then I think they released the original on like a third compilation. I forgot if it was like Miami or ADE was one of those.
Yeah.
And then the miracle of miracles, like literally the perfect storm that I'd never dreamed of in my entire life, is that King Street gets bought out by Armada Music.
Right.
And this thing called iBeat Fund, which is now this huge conglomerate. They're trying to buy, snatch up every record catalog out there for good dance music. And so the song got re-released on an Armada compilation and put out on this new King Street. So that it's amazing to have one song that just had legs that just won't stop. And it's only been it only went out on Armada back in August, so I'm sort of thrilled to see what happens in the next year while I sit and and work on other projects and see if that thing keeps going, or who knows. But that was certainly exciting. And I'm still conflicted whether being on a record label like that is better than having your own.
Yeah. I don't.
There's really great qualities of having both.
Mhm.
I love owning my own stuff and
For
owning a whole
sure.
catalog of a couple hundred songs. Um, but with the financial state of this industry, I'm not sure relatively how much that even matters.
Mhm.
Um, and the cachet that comes with being on these record labels, I think, is the thing that everyone loves and is exciting. Is the fact that, I don't know, people may look at you differently or respect you differently. I mean, it was the same music I would have put out on my own label, but all of
Right.
a sudden, because this label signs it, but that's kind of the way the whole world works. You get endorsed
Right.
by the
Mhm.
big shot, and then all of a sudden, people look at you differently. You know,
Absolutely. Yeah.
uh, and for me, that was some really nice validation after throwing up hundreds of songs over 25 years
Mhm.
of having things go out and fall off the face of the earth in a week.
Right.
So it's definitely an exciting thing to do, but also just different. And I'm back to putting stuff out on my own label because it's at my own pace.
Mhm. Right.
I mean, I have like, I think there's still 2 songs from that, from putting stuff out that still aren't out, and those labels
Yeah.
will get to them one day.
Right.
Like, it would be nice to hear it before the song sounds old.
Yeah. So do you feel like releasing music on other labels has really helped you expand your community and grow an audience?
Not at all.
No. Yeah.
Not at all.
Yeah.
It's really weird. I thought it would. I honestly
Mhm.
thought, like, oh my god, my numbers are going to explode. My Instagram's going to blow up. I mean, the Groovy Rhythm, when he, like, the 2 releases that I did with him, I probably grabbed another 20 Instagram followers, but then I lose 2 Instagram followers a day.
Mhm.
Uh, just, so I seem to be, I think I lose more
Oh.
than I gain. I don't know
Yeah.
why. I'm also not I'm not a cool brand as far as, like, I don't have a super cool name. I'm not like, oh, let's go see the Dub Addicts or whatever. Like, it's just Knox. So, I
Well,
actually
no.
have a couple cool. I actually have a couple cool aliases,
Mhm.
but those, because I don't want to promote and push those. I just want to see how they naturally go. Those are,
Right. Yeah.
those aren't growing rapidly either.
Sure.
So no, it hasn't. But you know what it has done? It I don't know why, but my whole life I just always had this thing to prove. Like,
Mm.
shit, I can do this. Like, I can rock this. I know I'm good. I know I can
Mhm.
prove to the world that I'm good. And putting stuff out on my own label and having some beautiful music is great. But again, you kind of just sometimes need that verification from, again, from another
Right.
label or something.
Mhm.
Um, and even after King Street, I still had this, got to do better, got to do better. And honestly, the day I heard the announcement for the Armada music,
Mhm.
that this anxiety in me just disappeared,
Hmm.
and it was gone. And I was like, I made it. I did it. Like, this was the
Yeah.
goal. This was the goal. I literally spent 30 years of my life trying
Hmm.
to achieve, and it doesn't matter what the effects are,
Mhm.
whether anything else happens from them. Like, I proved to myself that I
There you
could
go.
climb this
Mhm.
mountain,
Right.
and I stood at the peak of Mount Everest, and I exhaled, and man, it's just easier now. I
Well,
don't have this
good.
anxiety, and I don't have this. I don't claw at, honestly, like, I would work 12 hours a day at my day job, and
Mhm.
then come home and work another 5 hours at night on music,
Yeah.
and then work all weekends. Like, I
Those
was
long. Those
working
long
for
days.
for decades. I worked 100-hour weeks, and I loved every minute of it because I loved my day job and I loved doing the music thing. But it was like I just always had something to prove, and then there's nothing worse when you put out a release that just gets crickets, you know.
Mhm.
And you're like,
Right.
okay, the next one, and then the
Yeah.
next one, and then it just becomes this obsession. But again, after Armada, I was able to exhale and just go, okay, I reached my goal, and I
Hmm.
can relax and just, and just not have to think I have anything to prove anymore. you know.
That's cool. That's a good place to
Yeah.
be. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So I know. So you talked a little bit about releasing stuff back on your own label, and then I think I haven't been on social media much, but I think that I popped on there. I don't know, maybe a month ago, and
Yeah.
I think you had said something. You had a post out there that said that you were looking for submissions for your for KHM. Have you, I guess, started receiving submissions? And well, I guess you have, because like you've put a few things out from other artists. Like, I guess, what's the thought process behind I guess getting kind of going back to like that role of being a label boss and like having people send you demos, and what's your story there?
Well, I'm at the point where doing all the work for the label is just it's muscle memory. It's just,
Sure.
I was a video editor as a career, so making graphics, making little, social media things, and just doing all the things required for social media and the label. I was just, it had gotten so routine and so easy for me that I was like, okay, I can pile in more people now on top of my own schedule. And I basically, I made the announcement because I know that, one, there's a lot of crappy record labels out there. I'm doing this thing where on release day, I send PayPal for $25. I don't know what this record's going to do, but you're going to at least see some money in your pocket, unlike other labels that will maybe ghost you after taking your record. I've definitely seen that. So I just, I'm one of those people that for some reason always chooses the hardest route, but it's the most satisfying, you know? So my route is, let's open the door to people that make good music, that want to be heard, that don't have a record label, that don't want to go to a record label that's just going to take their music and then disappear.
Sure.
I remember I did a remix for Tasha LaRae in like 2017, 2018 for, big label. I was so excited. It was Tasha LaRae, one of my, it was like a really great like I loved the remix I did. And on release day, it went out, and there was one Facebook post, and the song never even like charted. And I was honestly heartbroken. I was like, what? Like, I don't, how does this work? How did I work so damn hard and put this remix out, and your label puts out one Facebook post and the song doesn't go anywhere? I'm like, what did I just kill myself for and give my music away, and so I don't want other people to fall into those same traps. Because out there, honestly, there's a lot of traps, and there's a lot of these record labels that, are just, you'll see that they're just there to throw out as much music as they can, and just make money. I understand that. I mean, there used to be a lot of money in this industry, and people who made a decent living 10, 15 years ago maybe are having problems putting food on the table, or now have to go actually get, another full-time job, if they were even able to do the music thing. But now it's becoming so desperate, that just people just aren't treating each other well. And I think that at least in this community, we could, treat each other well and represent each other. The first release was actually an alias of mine. It's called Broflex, and I just came up with a funny name, decided to put that out. But then brother James decided to throw me a dope track. Funky soul vibe, which after almost a month is still on the Garage Top 100.
Nice.
With a true to life remix following dropping this Friday. So I'm like, nice. I wasn't expecting to pull in this kind of caliber just opening the door.
Sure.
I was honestly expecting to get like dozens of people that I'd never even heard of before.
Yeah.
But I guess, people like who I am and like my reputation and decide, this is a good chap to go with. So we actually have an interesting lineup. Jay Potter threw down one last week as well. And then I've got a bunch of stuff lined up for next year. So we'll see. It's
awesome.
Again, it was just, it was simple enough for me to, at this point, sort of put everything into my routine so that I could, do the graphics and do everything. I also offer mastering if the artist wants it. I have I spent years learning how to master and finally figured a bunch of stuff out. And I figured out Ozone, which is nice, but I'm pairing it with some heavy duty analog tube gear. I've got like an analog tube, like I've got like a Chandler Limited compressor. We've got like an analog tube, mid-range harmonizer, a back EQ for mastering, like a lot. So it runs through this stack of tubes to warm everything up. So again, that's something I throw in for free if the artist wants it to help them out. Because I didn't truly understand the mastering thing until literally like a few years ago. I thought I did. And, you think, oh, this is mastered. And then you really A/B it with other stuff. And I always felt like I was missing something. And then things finally clicked after, tons of research and practice. So again, now it's something I can offer, to people on the label. So we'll see. I'm excited for 2024 and to see where it goes. Cool. As a small house label, I think, I didn't even think people really knew what it was, but, cause funny enough, I had put out the same thing like 3 years before and got like no response. So maybe it's now tied in with me being on other record labels. Maybe now, Yeah.
Well, maybe it hasn't. I mean, you said earlier that it hasn't really, being on other labels hasn't really grown your audience that much. But I think there's more than just the Instagram likes and the Instagram follows. I think that I feel like it has kind of cemented you a little bit more, or embedded you more into the scene and the community, like, and kind of deepening those associations that people have with you at more of a deeper level than just the vanity metrics of Instagram and Facebook and whatnot. So.
And the problem is that, I think as an artist, maybe you will ever experience 1 or 4% of an audience, unless I'm out there, touring the world, standing in front of people. How does somebody who's, always home working on music, even know he's got fans, Right. So I think that, there was a whole movie about this guy who was famous in America. And then he ended up going to Africa and realizing he was like world famous over there. I forgot the name. It's got, the name will pop into my head at some point. But there was a whole movie about that where this guy was literally like famous in another country, had no idea, went there like on vacation, and all of a sudden becomes this, like big music guy over there. Yeah. So that's the, so I just don't see it because people don't express it through social media. People like to use social media for negativity mostly, I think, than to push things that they love. But I do agree with you that it probably has helped me much more. I will say that I've done songs that I thought were going to do incredibly well, ended up going out with crickets, but then people who call me up and say, hey, I want a dope remix because I heard you did that. And I'm like, oh, okay, you were one of the 4 people that heard that song and now hire me for a remix, So it's, again, it's unfortunate that there's, we never really feel, I mean, I'm sure Beyonce knows how many fans she has because she can hear it anytime she goes to a concert. And we just live in a different world where, where there's 30 people in the shop box on Deep, and you think, well, that's the audience there. And you have no idea that there's maybe a couple thousand other listeners out there,
Sure. And for listeners who aren't familiar, so Deep is d3ep.com. That's the radio station that you have a radio show on. There's a lot of us there that have regular radio shows. It's a good place to hear some deep house music. So, and maybe that's
and a great station. I mean, what Grant Nelson has done, the way he programmed the website itself. I also I picked up a gig on data transmission once a month on Fridays, and while I was like, oh my God, it's data transmission, this is legendary. Well, there's no live aspect to the show. You just kind of upload it, and the podcasts will get a couple hundred plays, which is phenomenal. But there's no interaction that can compete with Friday night in the shout box on Deep Radio Network.
Right.
It's just a funny group of people all having a blast.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't even know where else to go to experience something like that.
Yeah, it's a great community for sure.
Yeah, I'm just doing. I was going to do once a month, but it ended up the way the station works. It has to be once every other week.
Yeah.
So every other week for the next couple of weeks, or probably until next year. Though a weekly show is a lot of work.
It is. I tried
and the
doing
thing
a
is
show
like,
weekly for a while, and it's too much.
Once you finish your show, you're like, okay, next one. Like there's no breathing space at all.
Yeah.
And I did that for 4.5 years or so, like every Friday for like I think it was at least 4 years.
Yeah.
And you have to be an athlete in shape for that, and I am not in that shape at the moment. And it's also really expensive. I mean, I don't. I get a ton of promos, but I tend to just shop and play what I find. Every now and then I'll pick some stuff out of promos, and there's actually always some gems in there. But for the most part, you have to purchase it. So 60 songs a month. If you're doing a weekly show, those bills add up.
They do add up, and then it's
trying to just ease back into it.
Because there's always a different pull or pulls in different directions. Because if you're like focusing on mixes, then it's taking away from production time. Then if you're doing a lot of productions, then you can't make as many mixes or as much. And then I'm finding that as I try to create valuable content for people for the audience, that takes time as well, and it does take time away from production. And so there's never really like a good balance, it feels like. It's tough. And then when you have to fit in like a family and a day job, for sure,
these things can become unbearable. I mean, the thing is that there's never like the higher you climb the ladder, so the more the work piles on. It's never less. It doesn't go the other way,
right?
Because then the more in demand you are, the more people want you to mix this and that. We look at entities like Defected, and they've got like all this content that's getting out. They like have multiple mixes every week, and between Glitterbox Radio and Defected Radio and whatnot. And we have to remember that they have a team. They have like a huge team,
people to support that. So we can't think that we can do all of that ourselves without the same team that they have. So,
but it's crazy. But the wildest shit is that the technology lets us compete, which is what I love. At least we have a chance.
Right.
I mean, what a lot of people in this industry don't understand is that we're at home on a laptop, competing with guys in a studio with an SSL.
That's true.
Busting out a $300,000 console to make a house music track so that it sounds phenomenal.
Right.
So there are like the levels in this industry are crazy that you compete against.
Yeah.
But at least you're in the game.
Sure.
It is a good point to just remember that when you're trying to compete against someone like Defected or a lot of these entities, there's dozens of people. I mean, what is the Defected, a staff of 150? Who knows? But I mean, that's probably just one city. But
so I wanted to talk about, like you said, it's we can compete with like some of these bigger entities or brands or whatever. So when you say compete, some people might argue, okay, well, this isn't really a competition. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, it isn't and it is.
Sure.
Because I think as human beings, we're just competitive people, and unfortunately, this industry has gone and charted and categorized everything so that everything's numbers. And, I mean, I don't believe for a second that a song is better because it's at the top of a chart. I actually, when I do my record shopping, I always start at the bottom of charts and work my way up because I think that if you're at the bottom of the chart, then you're good enough to get someone's attention at Track Source to throw it up there, even if you're 100th. Because I think that a lot of the things are at the top of the chart just because of politics or how, or just, someone's track record of sales,
Mhm.
and that's fair.
Right.
If you're constantly selling well, then you're always going to be at the top of the charts. But that also doesn't mean your song is better. It just means you're better at, marketing or have a better, crowd of people that just, constantly buy your music, but it doesn't always necessarily mean the music's better.
Sure.
I think that there's always a lot of gems when you dig. And a lot of times I'll just, when I'm looking for music, I'll just look under new music and find things that aren't charted.
Mhm.
Again, there's so much beautiful stuff out there. I think,
is.
like, if someone ever asked me, like, who's your favorite artist in the house music industry, I would say that unnamed person that just nailed a song,
Mm.
because there are so
Yeah,
many
I
of
like
those
that.
people
Mhm.
that just, because I think a lot of people at the top are scared of going outside their own box
Mm.
these days, because they're like, oh, if I go outside my box, then my crowd won't like it and they'll boo me, and then
Right.
and then they won't buy it and the whole world will fall apart. um, but there's a lot of people that don't have a name in this industry that are incredibly talented, and you just, you got to dig for it. But that's our job as DJs, to dig for that and to
Sure.
play it. I mean, I don't believe a DJ should play what the audience wants to hear.
Sure.
I believe that the audience should like what the DJ will present to them as something they never
Mhm.
heard before.
Right.
I mean, the whole beauty about growing up in New York City is that club music was club music. It was called club music because it was
Mhm.
never played on the radio,
Yeah.
right? So the only way you could ever hear it was to put on some clothes, drink some beers, go out and
Mhm.
party, and you'll get to hear music that will never ever make the radio. And nowadays it's different because of the internet, and
Mhm.
I think even radio stations are more inclined to play stuff that would be playable in clubs. But to me, the whole point of a club is to just play that stuff that isn't,
Right. Well, and
there's
it's so interesting seeing how things have evolved, because, like, club music was club music, and then it was always underground until it wasn't, and then it started becoming like really, really, there was like a wave of, I don't know, maybe like a handful of songs, like a dozen songs or so through the mid '90s that were dance music songs or house music songs that got some radio airplay. But then after that, it kind of like fizzled out and whatnot. And then the big explosion of EDM, and then and now this proliferation of all these different like subgenres and whatnot. And so I don't know, it kind of seems like that we've had like this explosion of like popularity in dance music, but then it's also a certain kind of dance music, and like this underground stuff, the underground music that you and I create, that we like, it still is underground, and you still kind of have to search for it, and you still have to, and you can't, I mean, people still have to kind of find this traditional house music, they have to, because they're not necessarily going to get it from top 40 or from the mainstream music scene at all. They kind of have to stumble upon it.
I mean, it's going to have to be internet radio.
Yeah.
I guess mostly internet radio would provide that these days, or whatever, local clubs these kids would go out to would be their best, best place to hear this stuff. But the thing that fascinates me is that the genre is still alive.
Yeah.
Honestly, like, I mean, you blink your eyes and all of a sudden you're at an age where you're listening to old people music, I guess, and but it's still fresh and phenomenal. But it's I mean, it's where I mean, it's just like jazz or Sinatra when I was a kid,
Right.
But the fact that it's still thriving, not only is it it's thriving on so many different levels, and I think the EDM thing, I just love the way it exposed everything and opened, raises the ceiling and raises the bar.
Absolutely. Yeah.
People can complain about it, but I mean, what's wrong with having a higher ceiling, especially with an industry that always seems to be like super underground?
Right, because there's going to be that entry point for people. I mean, for my entry point to house music wasn't through necessarily the underground. I mean, of course, I like pop music, and I first heard house music as like Black Box, Strike It Up and whatnot, and that was my exposure, my first exposure to house music. But where do you find? I didn't know how to find the scene or anything like that until I started going to clubs.
Yeah.
So it's
and that's the thing, and the club world and the radio world are two separate universes.
Absolutely.
And I think they collide more today because I think because now you can go into a club that will just be open genre. I mean, that's not the club for me,
Right.
but it is there for people that want to hear the same thing they heard on the radio for lunch. But again, there's still there will always be an underground scene. I mean, I think in 100 years from now, we're still going to see the same thing. It's still going to be house music going strong. It's just one of those things where, you come across something in your life and you're like, man, that's it. Like it hits the spot. There's just something about house music to me that's just so special. It's just raw and dirty and emotional.
For sure.
And I think that most of the house music that I grew up on was unpolished. And because it was, mostly people with crappy recording studios. I mean, for me, that the house music was, you're making it in your house. So, you got a little Mackie digital console, or not even that, you had a Mackie 32 bus back in the day, and and some synth machines and stuff, and you put this thing together, and you heard the hum in the line from the electricity in your house. I mean, so I mean, there were it's just raw and dirty, but this music is all about emotion. For
sure.
I mean, it's fun to strive and to make phenomenal recordings, but let's not forget it never started like that, and it doesn't matter. If your song is dope and sounds a little off, who cares?
Sure. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. I wanted to ask you about maybe they were switching gears a little bit. So you've been doing the radio show for several years. Got back into it recently, and then have you spent much time playing out? Like, have you played your tracks to an audience of people?
So that's the one factor in my life. That's the one door that hasn't opened. I was DJing when I was a kid. And again, my first job out of college, DJing for fashion shows. I DJed a bunch of nightclubs in New York City. And I had a major life change. And so I had a career change, falling out at the job. So I ended up becoming a television show editor. I guess it's called an avid editor as a career. So I ended up doing that at like Sony and MTV and Viacom, and it was a whirlwind of magic. Like I put my foot in the door, and all of a sudden my life takes off. And I grew up this poor kid, and I'm like, wait a minute, I got a job with money and working for MTV and doing things, but it was a around the clock job. You're either on staff working all day, or you're freelancing and you're available 24/7. So I really was always a bit worried about trying to get back into the whole DJ thing, and focusing on on that career. And then again, I ended up doing that for 25 years. And at the end, worked for some really high profile TV shows where I was like, I'm not risking, I can't go out DJing tonight and show up tomorrow half-ass.
Right.
So those doors never opened, and I never tried pushing them open. In 2019, I said goodbye to my day job and shifted gears to music. And then COVID hit. And I'm like, shit. Okay, what now? So that's the one door that still hasn't opened. I'm still trying to figure that whole thing out. I kind of thought maybe if I got on some of these big record labels, someone might invite me to DJ at a dope club. But I think that if I were in the UK, I'd be DJing like every day at another place.
Maybe.
But the scene over in New York City it's tough. And again, I think that's definitely part of my future and in like the next chapter. And just waiting to see. But also,
it'll happen. And I know it'll happen.
I've lived in the Northeast for most of my life, and can no longer tolerate winter.
Yeah.
And believe I will be moving next summer out west. To like the Phoenix, Vegas, California, Palm Springs-ish area where it's never less than 100 degrees. And then I'll figure it out from there, because I will be like sort of fully retired from everything, and we can figure it out. So we'll see. And I think that It's also tough for me to travel from where I am at the moment. So again, once I'm out west and I change a few things in my life, hopefully those doors will start opening.
For sure. So what is your dream gig for DJing?
Wow. All those clubs are closed.
Yeah. That's the sad thing. The music's still here, but the club, the music's still here, but the clubs are closed.
But honestly, I think I'd love to, spend a month or two in Ibiza and, spend playing some clubs there. But honestly, through Deep Radio, I've met so many phenomenal people from the UK and get so much love. And they invited me out there next year to do some things. So
awesome.
Hopefully I will be out there and spinning a bit. I think honestly, like to me globally, it seems like there's more passion in the UK about house music than in any other place I've ever seen.
I think that's always been the case. Since the 90s or late 80s.
I didn't know about it. But that's the whole thing. It's like I missed out on the UK house scene in the 80s and 90s because there was no internet. Yeah. So here I am over here loving it and, and going to clubs every single night, for decades. And didn't really even, I knew, I went to, when I was in college, I went to London and we went to the Hippodrome and Busby's and a couple nightclubs and it was a blast. But I was like, I just didn't know, I didn't think that there was a scene or anything. I just thought, every city has some nightclubs. But when I joined the Deep Radio network and I think, that and a ton of friends on Facebook from the UK, I was like, holy shit, these people are mad about house music even more so than here. For sure. And they seem to also really support their artists, more so. Certainly maybe not this genre, but certainly in other genres you can see, Europe is tossing out, $60 million to, to other artists, putting them up there. Right. I don't see anyone over here making 60 mil. I'm not even sure if Louis Vega makes that. Yeah. So there's absolutely so much love. So UK definitely, and Spain. And then, so I'm just throwing those out there. So hopefully I'll be there next year and we'll see.
Well, put it out into the universe and hopefully, the universe will hear it. I'm sure it will. So yeah. Well, this has been a really good conversation. I've really enjoyed getting to know you better. And for anyone listening, what is the best place, or how do they find out more about Knox, and where's the best place to find out more about you and connect with you?
Let's see. There's certainly my entire catalog would be on TrackSource. Just look up Knox, search for KNOX. Okay. Knox on TrackSource. I should be the first one popping up there. You'll see a picture of me.
I'll be sure to put a link in the notes for the show.
Oh, great. That and Facebook. It's Graham Knox Frazier. I also have a Knox thing, and which I'm trying to put more energy into. It's hard to think to post 7 different times for all the different accounts we have. But Graham Knox Frazier at Facebook. I still have room for 40 or so friends before I hit the limit. And you can watch me there. I certainly like to post about all this stuff and share it. And hoping that I inspire people to That's awesome. To follow their heart and to do what they love. Life is short, and honestly, I've spent so many decades and so much money and time doing house music, and I don't regret a minute of it, because it's That's just awesome. For me, it's just it's
for the love of it.
What I get from it spiritually and emotionally, that's all that matters. And I think I heard this beautiful quote from Rick Rubin recently, and he even said, he said, when you put out a piece of music, don't even worry about what happens to it. Don't worry about how people react to it. As long as you're happy with it, he said, that is your offering to God. That's on a much higher level. Yeah. And I was like, that's pretty deep.
That's really deep.
So, and again, we can have a lot of anxiety as artists, a lot of stress we put up with and competition and seeing other people, and it can get really frustrating, But in just keep trucking, and if you got to take a break, or people say don't quit. Honestly, quit if you have to, and if you get back into it, get back into it. But like, take breaks when you need to. Don't worry about quitting. Don't worry about anything. To literally just go with it. But I think one of the keys to success is honestly keep trying. And in this industry, it's very repetitive, but like each time try to just change something different a little bit, so that you can compare it with another method of doing something. I mean, I've done everything the wrong way a million times, and eventually you figure it out, and it clicks, but it's because it feeds the soul.
Yeah.
And I don't even honestly, like, when I left my day job, I was, if I didn't have another thing in my life, I'd have been like, what the hell now? What am I gonna do? Sit and watch all Netflix. So, it's wonderful to, spend a lot of time and become good or decent at something. And there will be a time in your life where you're going to have a lot more time, especially when you get older. And you can, this is not a race. This is a marathon, point, and I've seen so many phenomenal artists put up a record, and I'm like, where'd they go? What happened? Were you just here for the money? Because, so that's the thing. There's a lot of artists from way back who you never hear from again. And for me, for me, this is a lifetime thing. There's no end. There's no, for some of us, it's just how we breathe.
House music for life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, is there anything else you'd like to share with listeners before we wrap up here?
No, I think that's it. It's thank you for inviting me. Thank you for listening. I truly appreciate. I hope this podcast works out.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
I look forward to reading the comments.
Okay. All right. Cool.
But awesome, man. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode. I wanted to tell you about a free gift that I've created for you. It's a guide tailored to you producers who are trying to do music production around a day job and family responsibilities. I call it my release roadmap. As producers these days, we have a lot of tasks that we have to complete and a lot of hats that we have to wear. And this release roadmap is really a guide that simplifies the workflow of completing and releasing a track, from music production to sending demos to labels, and then on to promoting the release. When you implement a system like what I've outlined in this roadmap, all of the tasks become a lot less overwhelming, and you have more mental energy and time for creating music. You can download this roadmap at tonyfuel.com/roadmap. Again, that's tonyfuel.com/roadmap. Thank you for listening, and I will see you or hear you in the next episode. Take care.